Beautiful, Laney. Mamie Till Mobley was a mother of a 14-year-old black child who was lynched, viciously murdered in August 1955 in Money, Mississippi. And she wrote this book, Death of Innocence, about her son and everything that occurred after his lynching. And Mamie lived with her son and her mother, and she was very much a quiet person. Her mother was the one who took the lead on most things in their household, and her son, Emmett, was also a very precocious, very extroverted, very take charge kind of young boy. And so, her story is just, gosh, Lainey, I can't think. Forgive me. Between you and Mamie's story. So yes, she was a quiet woman who led an unassuming life until she was propelled forward into actually an international spotlight. Her son was lynched for allegedly whistling at a white woman in Mississippi. Mamie made the decision after her son's body was returned to Chicago, where they lived. He had been in Mississippi for a few weeks in the summer with cousins and friends, enjoying himself before his life was snuffed out. And after she viewed his body, she decided to have an open casket. And everyone tried to talk her out of viewing her son's body in the beginning because he was so brutally murdered. And probably she admits that he was almost unrecognizable. However, she said as a mother, she recognized his body by running her hands from his feet up to his head after they let her into the room to view the body. And she recognized his ankles, how his feet looked, in ways that only a mother knows every inch of their child. They actually did some work on her son's body before they had the viewing, and tens of thousands of people from the surrounding area and neighboring states walked by his casket. They reported that about 1 in 5 people almost fainted because of the sight of his body, because he was so terribly beaten. And she decided that she wanted to do that because she wanted people to know what hate could do. She wanted people to know what was the worst of mankind when driven by hate and by prejudice, and what this problem really was. And it impacted an entire nation. It impacted the entire US, and in fact, it impacted the whole world. I mean, there were articles written about Emmett and the lynching all over the world at that time. And she was propelled forward in the midst of this intense grief. Emmett was her only child. Her only child. And in the midst of this intense grief, she was called upon by life to go into the national and international spotlight, to speak about civil rights, to talk about hate, to talk about what had happened to her child, what she thought that meant for this nation. It was interesting because that role normally would have gone to her mother, but her mother just could not handle what had happened to Emmett and totally withdrew from life at that point. And so it was only Mamie who was left to do what needed to be done. And so she said in the midst of her grief, she was required to do this. Grief she just really didn't know how to handle, not just losing her son, but losing him in the way that she lost him. To have him taken from her in that way, to have hate take her child. To have to spend the time it took to try to identify his body because his face was unrecognizable. And yet she did what she had to do. She became a public speaker. She found the strength within herself. She said that she was able to walk through this grief period precisely because of what she was called to do. And that somehow she found the balance between her grieving and this call to be a national figure, to be the face of something other than hate, to do something she never, ever, 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 ever thought she'd have to do. Sometimes in life we are called to do something, and it becomes like an irritant in our life. That thing that just kind of keeps happening and it rubs up against us some kind of way. Something like it feels like a jagged edge is just running over you again and again and again. You know, in medieval times, they had something called a grindstone. It was a stone wheel, and they would use it to sharpen ferrous tools, so iron. And they would run this wheel, and often somebody was standing there turning it, and they would put a hatchet or a knife on the wheel, and it would grind down the uneven surface of the iron and make that tool very, very, very sharp. It would hone it to its best. But it was the constant action of this stone wheel against the metal that sharpened it and made it strong and made it able to cut deep through any kind of material. Life is often that grindstone, that wheel that turns, that thing that bumps up against us over and over and over again until we get sharpened into something we are called to be. Until we get sharpened. You know, the things that we talk about so often that come up in life, the things that we don't want to think about, the things that we don't want to deal with, but yet they are there in our lives, bumping up against us. And the more you want to run, the more you don't want to pay attention to it, the more irritating it becomes. And all it's really doing, if we'll allow ourselves to be open to it, is sharpening us. Wearing away our jagged edges, the unsmooth parts of us that need to be released, so that we can find underneath the gift that we are, the strength that we are, that we can find our own cutting edge to deal with whatever we are called to deal with. Mamie wrote this book, Death of Innocence, in 2002. She passed away in 2003. And she says here why it took so long and what she went through. So we're talking at 40-some years after the lynching of her son. It has taken all these years of quiet reflection to recognize the true meaning of my experience in Emmett's. It took quite a while for me to accept how his murder connected to so many things that make us what we are today. I didn't see right away, but there was an important mission for me to shape so many other young minds as a teacher, a messenger, an active church member. God told me, quote, "I took away one child, but I will give you thousands," unquote. He has, and I have been grateful for that blessing. That is why for 47 years I wasn't quite ready to write this book. It took a long time for me to reach this kind of deep understanding. I have been approached so many times by people who wanted me to tell my story or put words in my mouth to tell their version of my story. But I just couldn't do that. I owe Emmett more than that. I owe him the absolute understanding I finally have come to appreciate, the deep understanding of why he lived and died, and why I was destined to live so long after his death. You see, my story is more than the story of a lynching. It is more than the story of how, with God's guidance, I made a commitment to rip the covers off Mississippi, USA, revealing to the world the horrible face of race hatred. It is more than the story of how I took the privacy of my own grief and turned it into a public issue, a political issue, one of my own grief, one which is set in motion the dynamic force that led ultimately to a generation of social and legal progress for this country. My story is more than all of that. It is the story of how I was able to pull myself back from the brink of desolation and turn my life around by digging deep within my soul to pull hope from despair, joy from anguish, forgiveness from anger, and love from hate. I want people to know about all of that and how they might gain some useful understanding from their own lives, from my experience. But I also want people to know my Emmett, the way they might have known him had they met him so many years ago, as the driven, industrious, clever boy that he was at age 14, forever 14. Thankfully, Emmett has helped me to steer me in my lifelong odyssey. He does still. I often hear his voice, guiding or chiding, the voice of a boy much older than his years. In fact, as I began discussions for this book, I sat down at my kitchen table, my workspace. As I sometimes do, I asked that a trifold picture frame of images of Emmett and me be taken down from atop the china hutch in my living room and placed on the table in front of me. I focused on my own son while I considered this book. I scanned the pictures that portrayed a life from infancy, from boy to adolescence. I prayed and asked for help in making this important decision. The result is in your hands. Now, only now, I can share the wisdom of my age. I am experienced, but not cynical. I've been disappointed by so many of the people I've trusted over the years, but still I am hopeful that we all can be better than we are. I've been brokenhearted, but I still maintain an oversized capacity for love. Yeah. That is someone who's been sharpened by their experience. She let that grindstone work on her for 40-some years. And she came out of it with an oversized capacity for love. Most of us most of us will never know the kind of pain she endured. Most of us don't know what that was for her. There are parts of this book that I have wept through, reading her words about her experience. And to have something like that, and to let it work on you, and to be open to it fully, and yet have an oversized capacity for love, is a remarkable, remarkable thing. And yet she, I think, is a beacon for all of us about what's possible in our lives if we will be open to whatever comes down our path. That's what's possible. And sometimes it doesn't come fast. And most of the time it doesn't come easy. Because I'm sure these 40-some years for her were really, really hard. And hard's probably not the word. Hard's probably not the word. She was able to take something so horrific and let it not only be a beacon for her, but for a nation and for a world. And not come out bitter. And she admits, brokenhearted, but still willing to love. That there were deep, deep, deep moments of despair. But she still found joy and something in the life of her son for his 14 short years. To find a strength and a depth of commitment to love and to harmony and to unity. That's what's possible. That's why I love stories like this, because I want to know what's possible from the depths of the human spirit. And so many times we discount our humanness, especially if we're in metaphysics and New Thought, because we talk about spirit and we talk about that divine self all the time and our innate divine uniqueness, as if it's better than our humanness. But it's all one thing. It's all one strength. It's all one power. It's all one spirit. And we are infinitely powerful spiritual beings. Mamie shone her light. She is the object of love, the example of love that Deborah read about. That's what Lainey was singing about. That's why that brings tears to our eyes. That's why we feel those songs, because that's what we are. We recognize ourselves when we hear that, and yet we think it's something else. We think it's just the song. And yes, it is a part of Lainey's exquisite gift that she has. That instrument that she has, it just lights up a room and lights up our hearts. And it's also that through her voice, we recognize ourselves, but we don't see that. We think it's something else. We think it's something else, but it's really just our souls reflecting ourselves to us. So that we can see what we truly are. That's why I couldn't think when I started to speak. Just more and more I'm hearing those messages, and more I'm trying to embrace that about myself. And that's what we're all here to do, to embrace that about ourselves. that we are that love. Yes, it is God, and yes, it is us. That's what Jesus was talking about. Every single time he said, the Father and I are one. That's what he was talking about. And so I invite you, as often as you can, to see yourselves as this. To look to examples like Mamie Till Mobley. And probably if you read her story, you would think, oh, I don't have that. I don't know what that is. I don't have that kind of strength. And yet you do. Because if she does, each of us does. What one of us can do, all of us can do. That's what Jesus' life was about. That's why we call him the great example. What he could do, and he said the same, what I can do, you can do, and you will do it even better than I. We have to stop discounting ourselves. We got to stop saying I'm only human. We got to stop seeing it just in others and not in ourselves. And the more you see it in yourself, you will recognize it in everyone else. And then you'll get to the point where every single time you perceive darkness, or you think there's darkness in the world, you will know that you are an antidote to that you can be, simply by shining your light. Simply by shining your light. Simply by shining your light. Let's take this in a meditation. Just breathe. Just breathe. The love that you are is indeed invincible. Nothing on this earth can shake it. No circumstance or situation has power over you. You have only to live from your divine nature, your divine human nature. No matter what. You have everything you need to deal with it. Not just pull through it. But to do what you are called to do and be in the midst of that situation. And come out of the fire even stronger, more expansive than before. So whatever it is that you're dealing with now. It has absolutely no power over you. You're infinitely more powerful than any situation, any circumstance. You have at your disposal divine wisdom and intelligence, divine love, divine power, divine strength, divine imagination. Divine zeal, passion, and energy for whatever there is. Faith to match whatever there is. Life and vitality, energy. To walk the path that you are called to walk. And so I invite you to say in your heart of hearts, the love that I am is invincible. The love that I am is invincible. I am an infinitely powerful spiritual being. I am an infinitely powerful spiritual being. I am an infinitely powerful spiritual being. So whatever that thing is, it is no thing, nothing compared to who and what you are. Just take a breath. Relax into that. Let the grindstone work. Let the circumstances of life sharpen you so that you remember who and what you are. And discover how infinitely powerful you indeed are for the task at hand and so much more. There's no need to fight, no need to worry, no need to struggle. Just let yourself be what you truly are. Call upon your essence, your light. Call upon your light, that is the light of God, and shine it upon whatever it is. And watch the darkness burn away. Let's take a deep breath together. Exhale. Inhale again. Exhale. The light that I am is invincible. The love that I am is invincible. And so it is, and so it shall be. Amen.